Hello again. We are going to talk about where we find art. So, where do we find art? This quick image right here to start us off, you might recognize. If you do, you know where it is. If not, I'll touch on it later. We're going to start off with the Tate Museum in London. Obviously, museums are the place that we're going to find the most art, especially older art and very, very highly uh, respected and very expensive art. So the Tate Museum in London is an old museum. It is a giant space that has been repurposed. So here you can see the interior. It is a very large space that can be adapted to different artists' needs as they come through and create different artwork. So the first one we're going to look at here is called The Weather Project by Olafur Eliasson. And this is a big piece of metal, this big metallic circle in the middle there that has a bunch of lights behind it. And this is meant to be an immersive experience. So this is meant to have the viewers come in and have them feel like they're in a completely different space. This is what we call an installation piece because it is actually installed, right, within the museum and created specifically for that one space. So with this piece, the Weather Project, there are also misters that existed within the space to make it a little bit hazy. And throughout the course of the day, the lights behind that big metallic sphere would shift and change like the sun was setting or rising. And so, as you can see from this picture, it was meant to be something that you could experience with other people. And so, with that, you could lay down, you could think about being underneath the sun, and the way that people are experiencing the space and chit chatting very softly, maybe kind of creates this buzz, or maybe at some point, if it's later in the afternoon, there's not a lot of people there, it might be silent. A very specific experience that you're going to have as you're immersed, right? Immersive into this art piece. Same site, completely different artwork. So this is the same space, still at the Tate Modern in London. And this is called Test Site by Karsten Haller. And as you can see here, there's this giant metal tube slide that exists in the middle of the museum space. And this was created in 2006, so obviously way before COVID. I'm not sure that it would be allowed to exist now for a lot of different reasons, health and also safety. Like, I'm not sure that this is OSHA approved. But you can imagine you could actually go and like go down these multiple slides within this space if you chose to or not. So the artist explained this as being a multi-dimensional spectacle. So not only could you experience it yourself by going down these slides and riding them, but you could also see other people from the outside and kind of imagine what their experience would be like. Um, so you have this external watching other people, and then this internal one of being actually inside the actual slide yourself, which is very strange to me. The artist described what he wanted this to feel like, the feeling of falling. He described it as a quote, voluptuous panic upon an otherwise lucid mind. And I think that that makes sense. It's kind of like when you're on a roller coaster and at first you're just kind of like, all right, here we go. And then once you start moving, you no longer have control of what's happening around you. So you kind of start to panic a little bit, but you know that you're still safe. A really cool installation piece here. So we're going to move a little bit in Europe. We're going to go to the Chateau de Versailles in France. And this is, again, a very old established museum. It used to be a palace, and now it houses a lot of old Renaissance artwork. Think of the really famous pieces that you know. But they also have contemporary artists come in and show their work. So this is an image of Takashi Murakami. You might be familiar with his manga pieces. He is a contemporary practicing artist, and so here he is with a sculpture of his own. And he had this installation, or I guess I should say show, at Versailles, where he had his very contemporary sculptures and paintings integrated with these really old Renaissance pieces. And so it was this really interesting juxtaposition of his very brightly colored contemporary cartoon-like works up next to these really kind of classical sculptures and busts and the old framework of the museum and the chateau. If you were visiting Versailles at this time when his work was up and you didn't realize that he had a show, a lot of people were kind of miffed or disgruntled that this really contemporary artwork that might not suit their taste was being displayed at the same time as these really classic traditional artworks, or high art as we might call it today. But a really interesting thing where you can have today's artwork being kind of mashed up with the artwork of the historic past. And with that, we move over to Italy. So this is the Sistine Chapel in the Vatican within Rome. The majority of the ceiling was painted by Michelangelo. And we see a lot of artwork within religious places. So not just churches, but also temples and mosques. And at the time that a lot of these artworks were made, most people were illiterate. And so these paintings and sculptures that existed in these religious spaces were meant to explain the stories and the teachings that existed within the religious context. So obviously, a lot of these scenes within the Sistine Chapel would have been from the Bible. A lot of artwork in these religious spaces is obviously geared toward worship. Here is the creation of Adam by Michelangelo. I'm sure you're familiar with this image. This is on the ceiling in the Sistine Chapel. But artwork doesn't always exist within the buildings. Sometimes it is the actual building. So architecture is also something that we consider a form of art. And so here we're looking at La Sagrada Familia, and this is by Antonio Gaudi. This is in Spain, in Barcelona. And the exterior of this building is so elaborate, and it's all meant to worship God and the higher power. So here you can see the really, really ornate and elaborate structure. Those kind of arching support beams are called buttresses. And you can see the kind of cranes. Everything is always being worked on. But here's a close-up detail of the facade, or the exterior of the building. You can see all of that crazy detail. I've never been here. This is an image of the interior of La Sagrada Familia, and if you've ever been into a large church or a large place of worship, it really does encompass you in this kind of different feeling. And especially with those rose windows or those stained glass windows, it would have this otherworldly quality. And they call that sacred light that would come in through those stained glass windows. So having architecture itself, the place that houses all of this religious worship, is also an art in itself. And this is another place that we can find art. This you're probably familiar with. You're probably saying, yeah, I've been there. Or maybe you're, like, oh, I really would like to go there one day. This is in Chicago, and you're probably thinking, yeah, it's called the Bean. No, it's not. It's not called the Bean. It's called Cloudgate. And this is a piece by Anush Kapoor. It was installed in 2006. I lived in Chicago for a few years. I love this piece. I love that it is meant to put you in a context of seeing yourself in the city in a way that you don't get to experience often. Yeah, you can look at pictures of yourself standing in front of these pieces of art or buildings or whatever, but it's very unusual for you to see yourself reflected with the entire city behind you. So you can see yourself, the buildings, the sky, the environment, and all of these other people, and you're experiencing with other people at the same time. And this type of public art is really cool because it brings people of all different walks of life together. You don't have to pay to go see it. It's always there, and it really helps just enhance the entire space. This is a really interesting piece by a contemporary American artist named James Turrell. This is called Road and Crater, and it exists in Arizona. This was started in 1979. So James Turrell bought a crater, like purchased a crater, which is crazy. So he bought this crater, and here's an aerial view, decided that he was going to build this interior, this building, an experimental site that he wanted to be experiential as well. So he wanted people to be able to come into this building and experience the sky in a way that they never had before. So he built this space, and it has this oculus, or this oval shaped, which is sometimes round, opening in the top of the building that in the middle of the desert in Arizona, you can imagine there's no light pollution. So at night, you'd be able to stand within this space and look up at the sky and experience it in a way that you never had before. What's really interesting about this is that James Turrell bought this crater and started to build this location museum thing in 1979, it's still not accessible to the public, almost 50 years later. Crazy. This is an artist you might be familiar with, but maybe not know their name. This is Banksy. Banksy is a kind of anonymous artist in some ways, and most of their work exists in public places as a form of graffiti art or like guerrilla art, so like not something that's condoned. So most of his work does exist in public spaces. He does have some museum work now, but it usually interacts directly with the people on the street or has a common theme to the city. Here we can see that this woman would be cleaning and then sweeping something under the rug, but it's also interacting with the direct building. You know, he painted everything but that little brick layer. Here we have someone stealing one of the rings off of the Olympic logo. He also made a installation piece. I don't even know that I would call it an installation. It's more of a transformation, I guess. It's called Dismaland. I think you can tell from the image what he's making commentary on here. So it's this old kind of amusement park that is just not good. It's sad. And so he kind of transforms it into this place of not fun and happy and like the happiest place on earth. Not that. Cinderella's pumpkin chariot upside down crashed, and photographer paparazzi there just kind of observing. Crazy. There is a video of this in our optional resources. I love this. This is referring to the Lascaux Caves that we're going to talk about in just a minute. But this is a worker cleaning graffiti off of the wall, which is ironic because eventually a worker just like that is going to come in and clean this off the wall. We also find artworks in smaller galleries that might be more local. These can be either a physical place or they can exist solely online. Most galleries have both. So here you'd be able to see the artworks that are for sale or on view, and then also see past exhibits that have shown other artwork. This would be in the inside of that Gagosian gallery. This is what we call a white wall space. This is your traditional museum. Yeah, this is how we see art that is meant to be displayed within museums and is not necessarily something that would be on a public street or sidewalk. We also have craft markets, art fairs, things like that. I'm sure you've been to something like this at some point. These are great because they're local to the community and you can meet people that might be your next door neighbor and you have no idea that they make these really beautiful woodworking pieces or different kind of pottery or different kinds of crafts. And then there's also the biennials that happen, or triennials, whatever, these massive, massive art shows that happen every few years. This is an example of the one that happens in Chicago. It's a really overwhelming experience to go in here. If you have the opportunity to go, I say go. It's not my favorite way to see art, but it's cool. You get to see all different kinds of art from all over the world. This would be a more kind of community-based gallery space. And here you can see this is a reception. People are coming in to celebrate all of the work and the artists. But the work is hung from floor to ceiling, and that's called salon style. And they're basically putting as much art into one space as they possibly can, and probably hanging the works in specific ways so that they complement the works that are around them. Sometimes you have these pop-up galleries that happen as well. So this is a teeny tiny little nook space. Sometimes this could happen in like an old phone booth on the street or just like a little teeny tiny corner. Usually this is an unexpected place where you kind of happen upon the artwork. And then we have these almost mini galleries. I'm sure we've all seen display cases like this. I know there's tons at SMC. There's probably been some in your schools or your churches. I mean, they used to be in like grocery stores and stuff too. So sometimes you'll see art hanging like this. So this is the Kalamazoo Institute of Arts. This is the museum that was on the front of our mini lecture. If you've not been up to the KIA, I highly suggest that you go. It's a great museum. They always have something really nice hung. It's not that far away. I'm sure that you get in pretty cheap with your student ID as well. So if you haven't been, you should go. So now I want to get to the Lascaux Caves, and this is what one of your assignments is going to be based on. So the Lascaux Caves is this network of underground tunnels that exists in France, and it has all of these wall paintings on it. And these were created during the Paleolithic time. You can see here 15,000 BCE. So that's before current era or BC before Christ, however you want to think about it. So this is ancient. And so this is what our human ancestors so long ago, 17,000 years ago, went into these caves. They didn't have light, right? So they would have had a stick with that was on fire, and they would create these pigments and they would paint on the insides of these walls. And we have all of these animals that are displayed. There's a lot of handprints. We don't know exactly why they decided to create these paintings. Why did they leave these images? Were they to share information? Were they to ask the higher power to bring them rain for their food, to bring them abundance so that they could continue eating or travel safely? We don't know. But it is really, really incredible. And these caves weren't rediscovered until the 1940s by accident. And there's so many different tunnels. Now there's a bunch of different caves throughout Europe that have been discovered. So the Hall of the Bulls is one of the most famous areas within the Lascaux Caves. And you'll be doing an assignment based on this week. So you're going to go in, and when you get into the assignment, there is a link. I talked about this during our weekly update. You can take a virtual tour of the caves. I really highly encourage you to do it. It's super cool. So this is your message to the future assignment is based on the Lascaux Caves. And then your second assignment is going to be the Getty Project. And there's a link to this website as well. Essentially, what's going to happen is you're going to choose an artwork from a list of resources that I'm giving you. And you're going to recreate it using yourself or your family or your friends or your pets or whatever, and then just some household items. So here you can see this woman is recreating a Frida Kahlo piece, but instead of the parrots around her, she has some green cleaning materials. She's decided to wear a white shirt against a dark background as well. So really just kind of mimicking the artwork that she has chosen. So that is where we find art, lots of different places, and I will see you soon. Thanks for watching.